Welcome to the Beau Show, the home of faith, family, and freedom. Whoopi Goldberg is no stranger to controversial statements. As a host of The View, America's worst talk show, she regularly uses her soapbox to spit vitriol. And many times, either she says it wrong or it lands wrong, because she has had to apologize for some things that she has said in the past. Granted, the show is called The View. It's just that a vast majority of the views are liberal, and that's by design. Producers have created a show in which they create their utopia of free speech and ideological representation, but not the accurate picture of what America actually looks like. Most talk shows are structured this way, where the conservative host, and I do say host singularly, is the odd person out. The minority, even if that perspective is not a minority viewpoint in America at all, is relegated to underrepresentation. For instance, Whoopi, Joy Behar, Sunny Hostin, and Ana Navarro, a fake Republican, are all liberals. Alyssa Farah Griffin is a Republican, but an anti-Trump Republican, just like her predecessor Meghan McCain was. However, Joe Biden has a 43% approval rating and a 55% disapproval rating, according to Real Clear Politics. That puts the Biden supporters, 4.5 of them on this show, in the minority. In a Harvard-Harris poll of a general matchup between Trump and Biden right now, Trump would win by 5. DeSantis would win by 3. Now you understand why the majority on these talk shows is actually the minority view. But they will continue to spout these viewpoints to try to make them mainstream. Case in point, Whoopi Goldberg has said that the Holocaust was not about race, which got her suspended last year. She also doubled down on those statements. Whoopi always seems to weigh in on race issues, but ends up stepping in quicksand. Because of the way reparations are playing into network voices, academia, and entertainment, when outlandish comments are made, there is very little consequence. They are considered untouchable, much like Joy Reid over at MSNBC, who consistently says not only untrue things, but unintelligent things all the time. But she actually gets rewarded for those statements. Executives are afraid to discipline a minority's voice. No, I didn't say proportional minority voice, like the one conservative allotted per talk show. They can totally be disciplined. I'm talking about a minority race viewpoint. No matter the egregiousness, those mouthpieces can survive and thrive. They are held to a very different standard. So that leads me to Whoopi's latest comment, which came in the form of a question when expressing outrage over the police beating of Tyree Nichols in Memphis, Tennessee, which caused his death. Here's how she framed it.
When will the brutality finally lead to some police reform from the ground up? Because clearly, it doesn't matter if it's a white policeman or a black policeman, it is a problem in the police, in the policing itself. You know, things don't seem to make sense to people unless it's somebody they can feel or they can recognize. But how many times do we need to see white people also get beaten before anybody will do anything? I'm not suggesting that. So don't write us and tell me what a racist I am. I'm just asking, is that what people have to see in order to wake up and realize this affects us all?
Whoopi knows at least that this question is not a suggestion and is anticipating the outrage. And context is indeed important. But by a question, it could be a suggestion, not necessarily an inciting violence, but in terms of justifying it to be able to create the change she and others seek. The end would justify the means. To Whoopi, if more white people get beat up and die at the hands of police, then maybe something will finally be done. Is this true? Well, today I want to walk you through a few examples of police brutality towards white victims, because neither Whoopi nor the entire staff at The View will have the diligence to do this type of research. So let's walk through a few of these and see whether race actually plays a factor. The first example I want to provide is Tony Timpa. In 2016, Timpa was a 32-year-old American trucking company executive from Rockwell, Texas. He had called 911 for aid, telling the dispatcher that he had schizophrenia and depression, but had not taken his prescription medication. Timpa had already been handcuffed by a security guard when a group of police officers arrived. They restrained him on the ground while he squirmed, repeatedly crying out, "You're gonna kill me." They kept him prone on grass for nearly 14 minutes and zip-tied his legs together, one pressing his knee into Timpa's back. I want to forewarn the audience about this. This video is certainly disturbing.
Tony. Tony.
Relax, man.
No.
Get you some help, Tony. Relax, man. Just stay down. Tony.
No.
Tony.
Just keep him down. That's too much.
Stop it.
All right. Hey, you're okay. You're okay. You're okay.
Now, it seems that Timpa was a schizophrenic and was likely having an episode. But that did not prevent the officers from keeping him in a prone position for an extended period of time.
Sitting down, he's like rolling, pulling. And I was like,
Schizophrenia.
he definitely got kicked. So.
Hey, Tony, what'd you take? Yeah, he took something.
So what's the plan? HMFIC out here, sir.
We're going to, if they'll strap him to a gurney, one of y'all.
Well, they can both ride in the back. I'll drive the ambulance.
This is not.
Yeah, he was scrumming a little
Tony,
too
you
much.
still with us?
You all right, bud? You gonna be all right.
Is he acknowledging anymore?
He's moving.
Oh, I thought he nodded yes to your question.
Tony.
Tony.
Tony. He's breathing. Tony.
I'll make sure you're still breathing.
Yeah.
His nose is buried in there.
I think he's severely distorted. Tony.
He's alcohol. What the fuck?
Is he asleep?
He's
Snoring, that's what it was.
Yeah, he's asleep.
And then once paramedics finally arrive, they find out he isn't breathing.
So he was fighting and then just gave up.
Hey, I've got his mom on the phone, and she knows all this stuff.
He's dead.
He's what?
He's dead.
Well,
Timpa died within 20 minutes of police officers' arrival of cocaine and the stress associated with physical restraint. This is according to his autopsy. It took over 3 years for footage of the incident to be released. The footage contradicted claims by Dallas police that Timpa was aggressive. Charges were dismissed against the officer, and they returned to duty due to qualified immunity. But now a judge has reversed that decision, allowing the Timpa family to proceed in its lawsuit. Now, let's think about George Floyd's death. Very similar circumstances. You have a guy who is acting erratically, is on some sort of drug, which they believe was fentanyl in the case of Floyd. And of course, Floyd was much bigger than Timpa. But unlike Floyd, Timpa was having reactions from drugs mixed with schizophrenia. But the reactions to these two cases could not be more stark. The city of Dallas, Texas paid no settlement to the Timpa family. There was no national outcry. There were no vigils and riots and Al Sharpton showing up. But these were largely white officers on a white suspect in Dallas. They had him in a position with a knee in his back, making it difficult to breathe. And like Derek Chauvin, all cameras were on. We can see everything happen. So why were there no cries for reform after the death of Tony Timpa? Why were there no calls to defund the police? Could it be because race was not considered as a factor? Could it be because Tony Timpa was white? So when Whoopi Goldberg says that, well, maybe if more white people start getting beat up and dying at the hands of cops, then we will finally see change. That's a highly naive and disingenuous statement, or question, rather. She says it with such cavalier arrogance, too. She believes that all excessive use of force must be at the expense of a black man. when clearly I just showed you evidence of the contrary. And I think that if we're talking about outrage, we cannot be selective about it. Only just a few opinion and commentary providers made the comparisons between Timpa and Floyd. But the outcome was the same, 2 dead people. Yet the media coverage and aftermath have been starkly different for these 2 cases. It's almost as though Tony Timpa doesn't exist, or at least doesn't matter. If you say Tony Timpa, no one knows who you are talking about. But if you say George Floyd, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, everyone knows those names. And rather than Whoopi or producers of The View looking into this, they just let her go on her tirade, as she has before.